Darling, darling, I'll turn the lights back on now.
Hello, welcome back. You're gonna have to forgive me. I have been kind of battling colds on and off for like 2 weeks. And today, all of a sudden, I thought I got over it like a couple days ago. And today it was sniffling and sneezing, a lot of nose blowing. And honestly, I would love to have any other malady aside from a cold, because colds, there's no way to get around them. They just like hang on. Today's book is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. I had never heard of her. I have no idea how I found this book. Apparently, Stephanie Garber is the author of another very popular series called Carvajal, which I have heard of and I have thought of reading. For some reason, it's never interested me enough to actually pick up a book. The premise of this one, though, while I couldn't remember what it was when I started reading it, is about this young woman named Evangeline who her fiance, boyfriend, anyways, all of a sudden is getting married to her stepsister. She prays to a fate to stop the wedding, and then antics ensue. I was underwhelmed by this book. I had read a review that basically said, you don't have to read Carvajal. Like, this is an offshoot of that series, but you don't necessarily have to read it in order to get this book, which they're not wrong. And side note, this is the first in at least as of now, a duology. I was unimpressed enough that just because I'm a curious mind and I like to know things before they happen, I Googled the book. I figured out kind of what was going on with this book. All this goes back to say, I thought that the things that were established in Carvajal, which then play into Once Upon a Broken Heart, could have been reiterated, because apparently the fate, whose name is Jax, and then other fates that do appear throughout this novel, you get their backstory in Carvajal. You learn that what had happened to them, and that they had basically been banished, and then they had somehow been brought back, and that is not something you get in this novel. There's a brief mention of the fact that the fates had disappeared, but there's not a whole lot given about it, and I was like, wait a minute, like I feel like there's something there that I don't understand. And then we are introduced to the two characters that were the main characters of Carvajal. That I didn't necessarily need more of these princesses. I definitely felt like there was something else there that I was missing out on. But what I really felt I was missing out on is that Jax and Donatella. So there's the Empress, and then there's her sister Donatella. The thing with Jax is he is the Prince of Hearts, and his kiss can kill you, except for this one person who will be his one true love, who can make his heart beat again. It seems in Carvajal, Donatella made his heart beat again, but I guess that it really wasn't his one true love, because she then literally stabs him in the back or something, or in the chest, and that's not his one true love, so I guess his heart no longer beats. To me, that does not make sense. Like, if this is your one true love, then your heart's beating for them. If this is not your one true love, then your heart will not beat for them, no matter how much you think it's your one true love. It just felt like, from what I got, and then what I read of this other series, that Garber was trying to backtrack and retcon some of her own writing in order to make Jax a love interest in this novel. So the whole thing is, Evangeline, we opened up with her coming to Jax's church, and she's coming to pray to him because her love, Luke, is all of a sudden marrying her stepsister, Marisol, and she wants him to stop the wedding. This guy that she had passed, like ripping his clothes and crying everywhere, shows up, and he's like, that's the worst story I've ever heard. Turns out that this character is Jax. She returns home, because the wedding is happening at that very moment, returns home to find the entire wedding party turned to stone. Now she's like, what is going on here? And he's like, you wanted me to stop the wedding. She drinks the poison that they had all they had all drank, which will then reverse the effect on them and then turn her to stone until somebody comes and saves her. And she is 100% positive that Luke is going to save her. This is where I had my first issue, because I was like, whoa. I didn't mind that she decided to do that. I thought it was kind of cool. But I expected then this period of her being a statue to basically carry her into another century, because she's 1700s. And I expected her to maybe come to in the 20th century, 21st century. No. 6 weeks pass. It turns out that, and this is a little bit of spoiler, Jax had gotten another fate named Poison, who was the poisoner, to bring her back to life, because the overarching issue here is he wants this thing called the... So first, now that I've done my research, it is not Carvajal, it is Caraval. What he wants is for Evangeline to open this thing called the Valerie Gate. In the end, it all goes back to the fates and how they had been locked away and this, that, the other. We don't know any of that, though. We don't really know what the Valerie Gate is, or it's possible they explain what the Valerie Gate is, and I completely missed it because I zoned out a lot during this book. It failed to capture my attention. He has Poison bring her back to life, and she walks into this grand reception of all these people that she knows or that had been friends of her father. The only person that's missing is Luke. Her stepmother appears and Marisol appears, and they're all so happy to see her. However, we learn that in this 6-week period, Marisol has been termed the cursed bride, because guess what? Like 2 weeks after Evangeline turns to stone, she and Luke try to get married again. It is a disaster. He gets attacked by a wolf, and he is scarred so badly that he hides away in his house, and then he up and leaves, I guess, in order to find a way to fix himself. Now, she is like this very sympathetic character, and you see how her mother is verbally and emotionally abusive towards her. Evangeline has this great reputation because she saved this wedding party, and now all of these men want to marry her, and her stepmother has kind of set up this lottery system, not even a lottery system, but she's like, hey, submit your application and you could win. Evangeline comes upon a scene of all these men lined up with their applications, and she comes up with this lie saying, oh my gosh, my curse is still here. Any man that I kiss will turn to stone. She frightens them all away, angers her stepmother. Then she learns that the one safe haven she had, because her father has recently died, her mother had died not too long before that, but he had owned quite a few businesses. Why any of this is important, I honestly don't know. The business with the most importance was this curiosity shop. The mother apparently sold the curiosity shop even though it had been willed to Evangeline, because by all intents and purposes, Evangeline was dead. So the stepmother had sold it. There's a lot of minutia here, a lot of detail that you don't really need. Like, there's a lot going on. It does set certain things up. It does make you feel bad for Evangeline, but unless things come into play in the next book, I don't understand why it matters. Evangeline then goes to work in like a secret bookshop that her father had owned, and she receives a letter from the Empress, and the Empress and her sister Donatella, who are from Caraval, are telling her, hey, there's this ball up north. We want you to attend in our stead because Donatella can't go. This then connects back to Caraval and Jax because of their relationship, and I guess they knew that Jax was in the north. I don't know, but we learned that Donatella can't because she made somebody upset. We glean that it is Jax. I feel like we're pulling at threads here, But Evangeline agrees. She says, my one caveat is, can my stepsister come with me? They have had zero relationship, yet for some reason she feels so bad for Marisol. Granted, some of her guilt does come from the fact that she's at fault for them turning to stone. She made a bargain with Jax. She is the reason that something happened. She's like, let me bring my stepsister. They head up to the north, which is almost a land of fairy tale, of myth. Like there's all of these legends that come out of it. And then we do, like, this is a land of magic. This is a land that has dragons. All these really fun and interesting characteristics. They get there, automatically there is this event called Nocte Neverending. The whole deal is for the Prince of the North, Prince Apollo, to choose a bride because he cannot be crowned king until he gets married. Things happen. Evangeline meets this girl named Lala, or in my head I call her Lulu. She could actually be Lulu, and maybe she's Lala, or she's Lala, but she's actually Lulu. In any case, well, whichever one comes out of my mouth is what comes out of my mouth. They're at the first banquet, and Apollo, okay, my thing here is, yes, I get it. Evangeline is a romantic. She wants love. She wants love at first sight. She wants whatever it is for her to fall in love and meet the one. But my biggest issue with her is I never felt like she had a full character arc. There's very little, if no, development with Evangeline. On this first or second night, she is brought up to meet Prince Apollo, whom she has no attraction towards whatsoever, no chemistry with whatsoever. And part of her deal with Jax, in order for him to stop the wedding, was for her to swear to give him 3 kisses. It's of his choice, and so he imprints her with 3 broken heart tattoos. He commands her to kiss Prince Apollo, and if she doesn't do what she's told, she will die. She does, and this causes Apollo to fall in love with her. A week later, they're gonna get married. On some levels, I think it's great. It propels the story along. It's good storytelling. We're all like, excuse me, what's going on here? It would have made a better story for me. I would have been more comfortable with this whole plot line if I believed she loved him. But it's obvious she does not. She seems to be an intelligent person, that she has a lot of common sense. And then let's backtrack for a second. If Luke is her one true love, how is it that she is so willing and ready to go along with this thing with Apollo, feeling like this could be something? Like, she never says she's in love with him, but she's just like, oh, okay, this is all romantic. And I wanted a little bit more skepticism from her. This whole book, she doesn't question anything until it's too late, which is not, in my opinion, something that's a purposeful character flaw. It's just the way that she was written, because Barber thought that would be fun and interesting and a good way to develop her character, or a good characteristic for her main character. But back to Luke. I kept waiting for Evangeline to ask Marisol about it. We don't know if Marisol knew about her and Luke. We have no idea what that information looked like. But he doesn't show up at this welcome gathering. And then she does try to go to his house to talk to him, and the entire family has pulled up stakes. If this was her one true love, and she has absolutely no idea why he dumped her for Marisol, I would have been expecting her to constantly been questioning and asking and wondering and being like, what happened there? I need answers. And the only thing we get is Jax or her stepmother or someone plants this seed in her head that Luke didn't actually love her. Now she just like shuts the door on it because obviously he didn't. There's just a lot of lack of development for me to invest in any of these storylines and any of these characters, because my question throughout the first fourth of this novel is, what was the deal with Marisol and Luke? Why aren't we trying to figure out the truth behind it? Why don't we ask a single question? All it sufficed for me would have been one question about how did you guys get together? I didn't even know you were together. What caused you to get married? Eventually we get answers, but it's legitimately at the end of the novel, which I felt like this novel took forever. There were like 50 chapters. They weren't necessarily long, but they felt long, and there were a ton of them. And it was like chapter 46 before we got any answers. She gets to the north, and now she's engaged to Apollo, and I'm just like, I kind of would have liked this little thing to have been something of a parody, where she recognizes his affections, and she does recognize that his affections are not genuine, that they are a result of Jax and her kissing him. So I would have liked if it had been something of a parody of a romance, or of her being like, oh, I really shouldn't be doing this, but I have to because this is part of my deal with Jax and there's no way to get out of this. And when she finally does try to get out of it, he tells her there's no way to get out of it because if she breaks his heart, he will pine for her for the rest of his days. This is not just a normal crush. Good stakes. I like the roadblocks that are put in our way, but I kept waiting for that moment. Like when she's proposed to, they're at another ball. At this ball, Apollo is supposed to dance with a certain number of women. He steps out, and there is a running theme of, I can never remember which way my hair goes when I'm doing this. Anyways, there's a running theme of this legend of the archer and the fox. The thing about northern legends is they can change. They can have no endings. And so her entire life, she's never learned what happens. Like, does the hunter capture the fox? Does the hunter kill the fox? Like, what's going on? So her name is Evangeline Fox, if that gives you any sort of foreshadowing. Apollo comes in dressed up like the hunter. He leaps out of his carriage, comes straight for her, and he's like, I know I have to do this thing and dance with these ladies, but I can't. There's only one woman that I can dance with tonight. And she's like, oh my gosh, it's me. It's not her. It's somebody like right next to her, even though Lulu Lala is like, oh my gosh, it's so totally you. But then Apollo turns around and is like, marry me. She's saying, well, what about this other girl? And he's like, well, I couldn't choose you for XYZ reasons. And I was like, this doesn't make sense whatsoever, because you are implying that this other girl is the one that you are then going to propose to, because you are going to be giving her your attentions all night, but you're going to actually propose to Evangeline? Like, this did not make sense to me at all. I saw no reason why he couldn't be like, Evangeline, and then marry me. I didn't. I just didn't see any reason why he couldn't have done it that way, because it made no sense for him to essentially declare something for this other woman, only to then be like, no, actually, I don't want anything to do with her because this is the one that I want. They get married, and legit, it's like the night before the wedding is when Evangeline is talking to Jax, and she's like, I can't do this. There is a little bit with Marisol, because one thing I did like about this novel was there's something of a mixed media where you get a lot of like gossip rag articles. She's worked really hard to help Marisol shed the image of the cursed bride. And then she sees this article saying that Marisol has been seen going into like a witch shop, like buying magic, like spell books or something. So she does get this really pathetic excuse to get out of the carriage, go back to where they're staying to try to find evidence. She finds nothing except for a bunch of cookbooks that Marisol had bought earlier that day, and Marisol catches her. Just like, what's going on here? I saw what was being set up, but it was such a passing mention. It was such a minor plot point that I was like, it's not going anywhere. So it can't possibly be what I think is being set up. The wedding night happens. Apollo is waiting for her on the bed. He's oiled up. Evangeline is coming in, having convinced Jax to, he says, you go through with this wedding. I will allow you to break the spell on Apollo. And now she's facing the fact that she's going to break the spell on this man. He's going to look at her and be like, why did I marry you? What's the lesser of two evils? Staying with a guy that she doesn't actually like and who doesn't naturally love her, or letting him go and then being shunned. She walks in and she's so nervous that she takes this big drink of wine and she's like, oh my gosh, this is the nastiest thing I've ever had. Goes over to Apollo, kisses him. There's a moment where the spell is broken and then he seizes up and dies. She is arrested only to be broken out by Jax. He secrets her away to another location. She is the main suspect. She, while she's in her cell, is just crying. So when Jax finds her, he's like, those are not natural tears. I'm taking you to somebody else. Turns out to be Lulu Lala, which I was like, wait a minute. Is this the same girl from earlier from these events? Apparently, yes. She is another fate. Her tears can be deadly. The wine had been laced with her tears, which eventually could have killed Evangeline. I guess I missed it. Maybe it was never fully explained. I don't understand how she could have died. Maybe she could have cried herself to death. We are made 75% water, so maybe that's what she was dehydrated. I don't know. She's recovering. And then Jax says, we got another place to go. You have another person to kiss. It turns out to be this matriarch. I guess the whole deal is Jax wanted information from her. He needed Evangeline to give her a kiss so that she would be less aggressive and abrasive. Again, something that I missed. And I had to go back. I had to rewind to catch what happened. Evangeline asked enough questions that it snapped this matriarch out of her stupor, out of the spell. And she tries to kill Evangeline. Jax knocks her out and they leave. But this is where we get information, or maybe like our first insight into the whole Valerie Arch thing. We have already learned that there are some doors that cannot be opened without a special key. Now we are learning the Valerie Arch. There is this very powerful, very wealthy family called the Valors, centuries before. The rumor is, the legend is, they created a monster. They were then taken down before this monster can be released. And so now all of these ingredients are required in order to reconstruct the Valerie Arch so that this creature can be released. Evangeline, because of certain attributes, seems to be like the key, but there are all those other ingredients that need to come together in order to repair this arch. This is what Jax's master plan is. Somehow it does connect to him being a fate. We don't know what this monster is. We don't really know who's in the right, who's in the wrong. Is Jax a good guy or a bad guy? We encounter this other group, which is in opposition to the Valors and recreating and opening the Valerie Arch. And this includes Apollo's brother. That was another huge missed opportunity because you felt like he was supposed to be important, but he was barely there. Then when his big moment comes, you're just like, or I was like, this came out of absolutely nowhere. And so my big feeling throughout this book is that it was kind of choppy. We had a lot of really big moments, but it was like a lot of disparate books. It didn't feel like a cohesive narrative. Then what Jax wants to do is go to the vampires because another fate is like the lead vampire or something. Turns out that this fate, Chaos, is somebody that Evangeline had seen around the castle because they want to know who poisoned Apollo, who killed Apollo. Jax believes that Chaos knows. Chaos is like, I mean, it wasn't really us, but I have heard my potion master was approached by somebody and he might have put this potion together. And all the while, it's like the night to create new vampires. So they've entered this chamber and there are all of these humans who are there henceforth bitten, and then they're put in cages. The thing is, if they escape the cage and they are able to draw blood, they will become a vampire. If not, they return back to human form when the sun rises. Chaos is enticing Evangeline with information about the Valors. Jax is like, let's get out of here. This is dangerous. Don't listen to him. Do not let these vampires entice you. She agrees. And so they're on their way out. They pass through this room. And while earlier it had been empty, now it was filled with would-be vampires. And who do you think one of those would-be vampires is? Who? Just give me a yes. Luke. He is up in his cage. He convinces Evangeline, and this is when I'm like, you are not a smart girl. It's kind of a good pinch point. It's a really good way to create roadblock and suspense. But I was just like, I keep expecting more from Evangeline. And this is when I say she has no character growth. She is the very same at this moment as she was in the beginning. She has no new information. She has not grown whatsoever. She's extremely gullible. She allows him to convince her to let him out of his cage by telling her that Marisol had put a spell on him, that he had come to see her. Marisol had opened the door. She'd reached for his coat, touched his neck. That's all he could think about was Marisol, Marisol, Marisol. From then on, he had no idea he'd been under a spell until he'd been bitten by the vampire. She lets him out and he's like, not necessarily psych. I couldn't quite tell what the lie was. Was it a lie to get her to let him out? Was the lie that he still loved her, that he didn't want to be a vampire, that everything be okay? In any case, he comes for her, which we all saw coming and Jax had warned her about. Jax stands in the way and he is bitten instead. He snaps Luke's neck, but because Luke drew blood, he is a full-fledged vampire. My question is, the Fates are only immortal to the extent that they could live forever unless they're killed. Very little is given about chaos. Perhaps in Caraval, we learn more about chaos. Maybe we'll get more about chaos later. There's so much underdevelopment with characters, it's frustrating. Somehow, Jax is susceptible enough that he then starts turning into a vampire, because there's 2 vampire bites, 1 to kill, 1 to transform. So now Jax is turning into a vampire. And what does Evangeline do? She locks herself in a crypt with him. Apparently there's something about holy water that people would use to anoint their loved ones so that bad things can't happen to them, and is supposed to keep her safe. I don't know. He locks himself on one side of the crypt and she's on the other, and they're just like chit-chatting and she's trying to get information out of him. And then he's like, you know what? Like, I could have escaped this whole time. So he rips apart the bars and he's coming to her. There's an undercurrent of romance between them throughout this entire book. I thought this moment was both great and highly uncomfortable. I liked the tension that was created, but at the same time, it felt slightly inappropriate, and I was kind of grossed out, only because while there was more chemistry between him and Evangeline than her and Apollo or her with Luke, it felt very forced. And I think it's because I personally did not understand the whole mythology behind him and his one true love. They are sort of enemies to lovers. So if you like that trope, this could be a good book for you. So he comes up to her and he's like licking her neck, seducing her. She's like, you don't want to kill me, you don't want to kill me. And he's like, I kind of do want to kill you. And she's like, but you need me to open the Valerie Arch, which breaks him out of his stupor long enough for the sun to rise and him to have survived the night, not biting her and becoming a full-fledged vampire. So it's not uncomfortable in the sense that it was icky, like they were doing icky things, but it was uncomfortable because I don't know where her allegiance is. I don't know who I'm supposed to be rooting for her to be with. I did find myself wanting her to be with Jax, but it was like, I love him, I hate him, I love him, I hate him, and not in a good way. It was kind of like, I just don't know my own feelings. I can't admit to my feelings. They escape, they return to his place because all of a sudden he can't stand on his own 2 feet. She's trying to get him back to Lulu Lala's, but she can't figure out exactly how to get there. So somehow she's like, oh, my mother told me something about listening to bells. So she listens and she arrives at a door where the bell is the loudest. Nobody answers. She can't get in and she's like, wait a minute. If my blood, because she had used her blood once before to get her in somewhere else. She was like, well, if my blood got me in there, maybe my blood will get me in here. Door opens, turns out to be Jax's place. Guy's passed out. She's thinking, well, it must have been a traumatic night. He's gone through a lot. She lets him sleep. She starts snooping. She notices a shelf of the Hunter and the Fox books, none of which have an ending. And then she finds a Hunter and the Fox book that's not actually a Hunter and the Fox book, but it is a spell book disguised with the Hunter and the Fox cover. This spell book is the same as one of the cookbooks that Marisol had purchased. Prior to this, we've already learned that this is not a cookbook. This is a dark magic book. So we are suspecting that maybe Marisol is behind things. We have also learned that she is now engaged to Apollo and they are supposed to get married in 2 days' time. And that now Evangeline is no longer just a person of interest, but she is wanted for murder. So she says, maybe if I brew this one concoction, a truth serum, and get it to, not Apollo, I can't remember the brother's name, get it to the brother, it will break the spell that Marisol has put on him. He will clear my name and everything will be okay. And obviously Marisol killed Apollo. She brews it. She leaves a note for Jax. She goes to the palace. She encounters who? Marisol. And this was another moment that I was like, what in the heck? I really enjoyed the casting of aspersions. I enjoyed wondering who's good, who's bad. I wished more time had been given to it, but instead it was very much the way that Evangeline was with the love interests in this book. It was very schizophrenic. I was never given enough time to question and be convinced that, oh, this is the bad guy, because she's like, Jax is the bad guy. Apollo is the bad guy. Marisol is the bad guy. Apollo's brother is the bad guy. Chaos is the bad guy. Poison is, everybody in this novel she suspects. So she gets caught by Marisol. Marisol brings her into her room. She confesses to having put a spell on Luke because she was jealous of Evangeline. This is the face of somebody who's really tired of stereotypes and of really flimsy plot lines. But she claims never have done anything to Apollo. And she gives this whole spiel about how guilty she has felt this entire time. And then Evangeline admits to her pact with Jax, which enrages Marisol immediately. She calls for the guards who haul Evangeline off. It's at this point I'm thinking, who is Marisol? I wanted so badly for her to have been for more development about her so that I could, for myself, question and wonder and be like, oh no, please don't go near her, that kind of stuff. So then for the self-righteousness to erupt and automatically be like, you're the problem, it doesn't matter that we basically did the same thing. Like, if I'd had more development of Marisol, I had been truly convinced that she's the bad guy. She'd been playing Evangeline like a fiddle this entire time, and her getting Evangeline into her room was really just to get Evangeline to confess to something that Marisol had already known, so that now she could say, go to jail. That would have been so much better for me. But instead, it's like this girl who had the big doe eyes and the gallon-sized tears to be like, what? Excuse me? It doesn't matter that I stole your boyfriend to be my own because I was jealous of you. You formed a pact with a fate to stop it? Guards? Honestly, it's like, what would you have done? In Evangeline's shoes, you would have done the same thing. Like, if roles were reversed. So it's not like I want Marisol to put herself in Evangeline's shoes, but it's just like, you brought all of this on yourself. Yet Evangeline is the ultimate bad guy. She reacted to everything that you caused. It was a little much for me. Now Evangeline is going to be grilled by Tiberius, the brother, who has very little to do in this story at all, and I completely expected him to be somebody that we'd been seeing everywhere or that we didn't realize was important until he's revealed to be the brother. He admits to Evangeline, and so what she had done before she got caught by Marisol, she had succeeded in sneaking this potion into his room. He's grilling her. He tells her, I know from like the very beginning, I knew you weren't guilty. I knew you didn't kill him. And there are two theories as to how Apollo died. One, the poison wine with the tears, or the oil that he had rubbed all over his chest. The whole idea that Tiberius is the one, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Evangeline is willing him to drink this potion. But she, not mistakenly, but she had mixed it with this water that was really popular in the north. And Tiberius he sees the bottle, he's like, what is this doing here? Everybody knows I hate this. So we're like, oh, he's never gonna drink it. There's something very alluring about these waters. Eventually he does drink it, but this whole time she's like, just drink the water. Please don't break the bottle. Please don't do this, don't do that. But the potion doesn't seem to be taking effect. What he does reveal is that he knew she hadn't killed his brother because he had killed his brother. He is the one who had placed the poison wine in the room, hoping to kill Evangeline, because the tears were only supposed to affect women, not men. And so this is when I'm just like, I don't believe that Tiberius killed Apollo. I believe it's whatever was slathered across his chest, and that was placed in the room by Marisol, who's still doing a really good job of acting. Eventually, this little potion starts to take effect, which it's truth serum. It means that he cannot tell a lie. He is gonna kill her. And she says, don't. Like, your brother doesn't want, he's like, yes, he does. She's like, no, but he wouldn't want you to kill me. All I ask of you, call your guards in here, give them an account of my crime, and then have them kill me. So he does, but all he does is like gives them the hot poker and he says, kill her. She's like, no, no, no. And so she ends up getting him to try to tell a lie about her being the killer, and he can't say it because he cannot truthfully say she is the murderer because he knows she's not the murderer. And this is when he breaks down and he's like, well, she's not the murderer because I am, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, it's just not believable. There's such a lack of development and setup. There were too many red herrings and they weren't developed enough for me to believe this confession. I believe he believes that he's the killer, but for the author to convince me that he's the killer, it wasn't done. The guards haul him away. His last decree is for Marisol to be jailed or banished. And this is, again, I'm just like, was he under a spell or wasn't he? For me, it would have sufficed that because he knew what he had done to his brother, or maybe the whole plan was to kill his brother because he wanted to be king. He then was like, I'll marry Marisol. I'm going to use her versus Marisol using him. I don't know. It does seem that perhaps he had been under a spell by Marisol, because when he sees her, when he's being dragged out, he's like, I hate you, I never want to see you again. And then side note, something I forgot, he is part of this order that is opposed to the opening of the Valerie Gate, which is why he wanted to kill Evangeline. And this is why he and Apollo had argued earlier in the novel off screen, which again, I was like, when? Because they'd had many arguments off screen. So are we saying that this is the argument that happened before Apollo even met Evangeline? Because part of the prophecy is that she's going to be like a pauper and a royal. So she's an outcast because now she's wanted for his murder, but she's also a royal because she's married to him. The timeline didn't match up for me, but now Evangeline is the reigning royal. A guard comes to her and says, hey, there is this guy waiting for you. And she thinks it's Jax because she still hasn't seen him. She's like, holy cow, this guy is sleeping. Maybe it's different. Maybe it's more than just being tired. She says, bring him in. And the guard's like, no, you need to go to him. When everybody who's reading is like, oh my gosh, Evangeline learned to see the forest through the trees. She's following him and she's realizing this is not right. Jax, at some point in this novel, they learn to communicate telepathically. So he's like, little fox, where are you? And she's like, I'm coming to see you. And he's like, don't come to see me. Let me come see you. She's like, well, I'm already on my way. And then she's like, I think you need to come get me. And it turns out this guard brings her to this room where this other sketchy female character is, and Apollo's dead body. They reveal that he's not actually dead. Somehow he's just in a suspended state of animation. They want her to bring him back. She's like, well, maybe my true love's kiss, which we've established there is no true love. She doesn't love him. And some small part of her is recognizing this, but she's still like, I'm gonna kiss him and I'm gonna bring him back. Doesn't work. We basically end with her jumping to more conclusions and concluding that Jax, with whom she essentially tells us she's fallen in love with, is the guy behind everything. This book was really disappointing. Started off strong, but for me, the moment that it turned was when she was brought back to life after 6 weeks. I was like, that's it? I thought that she was gonna come to like centuries later and be like, what in the world is going on here? My true love Luke Where is he? I miss him. I love him. Maybe she learns a backstory about him marrying. It could have been Marisol for all I cared. But she learns that he married someone else and lived happily ever after or whatnot. And now she eventually finds somebody she never would have expected to love to be her true love. And I don't know, some other story from there. It could have been Jax for all I care. I don't know, or it could have been Poison. I don't really care who it was. I didn't see the point in her turning to stone for 6 weeks. 6 years? 10 years? 6 weeks? It left a lot to be desired. What happened in 6 weeks? Marisol tried to marry Luke again and he got attacked by a wolf. That is Once Upon a Broken Heart. This one left so much to be desired that anything interesting, which for me was basically the Valerie arch, wasn't enough to make me want to have more. And because of this, I have no desire to read Caraval. The only reason I wanted to read Caraval was because guys, it was obnoxious how much I've seen this book series out there. But after reading this, I have no interest in anything else she's written because I don't like the way she writes. You might like this book. Had a lot of good elements. It had a lot of potential. But in the end, no ma'am. See you later.